There are 5 things all clergy should know when their congregation members are involved in a wrongful death case. We all know that losing a loved one can be extremely painful under any circumstances. But when somebody loses a loved one due to the negligence, the carelessness, or an intentional act of another, then the pain can sometimes be multiplied tenfold, 100-fold. And so, unfortunately, I've seen many of my clients have tried to deal with the pain in a very unhealthy way. Some of them turned to drugs or alcohol. I had one client that committed suicide. So it's incredibly important that when somebody loses a loved one, that the clergy members provide the solace and guidance that they need to deal with their crisis of faith. Because the questions that they start to ask themselves is, why did this happen to my loved one? Why is this happening to me? Why was their life snuffed out prematurely? Why would a loving God allow this kind of an injustice? So those are questions that can only be answered a lot of times by the leader of the religious organization that they're involved with. And so this is, as a clergy member, this is your opportunity. It's a great opportunity for you to build that relationship with the congregation member and to really strengthen the congregation member's faith. It's important for you to remember that any communication that you have with the congregation member is confidential and privileged communication under the law. And that basically means that anything that they say to you, you do not have to repeat in a court of law, in a deposition, or ever, unless you choose to do so. You can do so if you feel like it's going to benefit your congregation member, but you don't have to if you don't feel like it's going to benefit the congregation member. And I can tell you this, as a wrongful death attorney, often it's the testimony of the clergy that becomes the greatest evidence in the wrongful death case. Okay, which brings me to my second point. As soon as your congregation member finds out about the injury that led to their loved one's death, or they find out about the death, then the evidence of their mental and emotional pain and suffering begins to accumulate. And their conversation with you is evidence that could be used, or maybe it's not used, depending on whether or not you believe it's going to help your client in the long, or your congregation member in the long run. But it's also important for you as the clergy to document those conversations in a journal. I highly recommend that you document the conversations in a journal because, again, the journal entries are privileged and confidential communication. You never have to disclose them. But if you later on feel like it's going to help your client, then you do have the right to disclose those journal entries, and they can be very, very helpful in a wrongful death case. So that's very, very important. The other thing to remember is that the congregation member is going to go through a process. For example, they're going to go through the memorial services, and they're going to go through all this. They may do testimony to the church, and if they do that, it's important that the memorial services are recorded by video and also by a photographer. And if your congregation member has a wrongful death lawyer, the wrongful death lawyer can pay for the videographer and for the photography as long as it's used for legal purposes. And so also, if your if your congregation member is going to give testimony to the church about his or her loss, then that can be extremely powerful. So it's important to have that videotaped as well. That's the next thing I wanted to mention. The next thing I think is very important is if you do contemporaneous notes or log in a journal your communication with the congregation member, then they have the opportunity to ask you not to disclose information that they told you. So under Florida's evidence code, you can disclose any information that you think would be helpful to the congregation member unless they specifically ask you not to. So there's a presumption that you're free to disclose whatever you think you should. But if the congregation member says, please don't say this to anyone, then that is completely confidential and you cannot disclose it. So it's important for you to know. One last thing that I think is important for you to know is that the evidence being built is critical so that your congregation member gets the full value of the wrongful death case. But your congregation member is likely not going to want to consult a wrongful death attorney because they don't want to have to deal with the pain. And they don't want to appear greedy. They don't want to appear that they're trying to capitalize on their loved one's death. And they definitely don't want to, seem like they're sue-happy people. But it's incredibly important for them to consult a wrongful death attorney as soon as possible because they need the advice and the guidance of an experienced wrongful death attorney to talk to them about how they can help build the evidence in the wrongful death case and also potential pitfalls that they might fall into that could damage their case later on. For example, building the evidence, it's important for them to start journaling themselves. Your congregation members should be journaling, and the way I like them to journal is to send me texts, which are confidential communications between the attorney and the client that I don't have to disclose ever because it's privileged and confidential, just like the communications with you. So if they send me texts in real time, journaling the pain and suffering that they've gone through, that can be very helpful. And the earlier they start that in the process, the better for their case. And then also, I want to guide them to avoid certain pitfalls that some of my clients have fallen into, such as setting up a GoFundMe account for themselves, which is not wise. If someone else sets up a GoFundMe for them, that's different. But if they set it up for themselves, that can damage their wrongful death case. And then also posting on social media. If they're a lot of them want to post on social media, but it's important that if they do post on social media, that anything that they want to post, that they run it by the wrongful death lawyer before they make that post. Otherwise, it could seriously damage the wrongful death case. So all of those things, those are 5 things that you should know as clergy about your congregation member's wrongful death case. My name is Jimmy Fasig. I am a wrongful death lawyer. If you have any questions about this or any other questions related to wrongful death, please feel free to give me a call. I am the senior partner of Fasig Brooks Law Offices. My number is 850-777-7777. Again, that's 850-777-7777. Thank you so much.